Dear classmates, welcome to the course, Architectural Drawing and Reading. Today, we are going to study architectural drawing standards and applications in order to unify the rules for building drawing, ensure the quality of drawing, improve the efficiency of drawing, make the drawing surface clear, concise, and meet the requirements of design, construction, review, and archiving, and adapt to the development of informatization and the needs of housing construction. China has formulated and promulgated unified standard for building construction drawings. At present, the latest basic drawing standard currently enforces Unified Standard for Building Construction Drawings, GB or T50001, 2017. Unified Standard for Building Construction Drawings is the basic regulation for building construction drawings, applicable to various professional drawings, such as general layout, architecture, structure, water supply and drainage, HVAC, and electrical engineering. Next, we will introduce the main content of the drawing standards from the following aspects. First, drawing sheet, title block and signature block. The drawing sheet refers to the size specification of the drawing in order to facilitate the binding, consulting and preservation of the drawings and meet the requirements of modern drawing management. The size specifications of the drawings should be as unified as possible. The sheet size and frame dimensions of architectural engineering drawings should conform to the regulations in Unified Standard for Building Construction Drawings, as shown in the following table. Drawing sheets are divided into two types, horizontal and vertical, as can be seen from the table. The one-size drawing sheet is the half fold of the zero-size drawing sheet. The two-size drawing sheet is the half fold of the one-size drawing sheet, and so on. The short side of the previous size drawing sheet is the long side of the next size drawing sheet. All drawings are serial the square root of two drawings, the position of the title block, and the binding edge of the drawing should be arranged in the way shown in the figure. The drawings used in the construction engineering major should be neat and unified. When selecting the drawing sheet, it is advisable to mainly use one specification and try to avoid using large and small drawing sheets mixedly. Under special circumstances, it is allowed that for a 0 to a 3 size drawing sheets, the long side of the drawing is lengthened according to the regulations in the table, but the short side of the drawing shall not be lengthened. For the drawings that need to be countersigned, the countersignature block should be drawn according to the format in the following figure. Its size should be 100 mm multiplied by 20 mm, and the specialty, name, and date represented by the countersigning personnel should be filled in the block. When one countersignature block is not enough, another one can be added. The two countersignature blocks should be juxtaposed. For the drawings that do not need to be countersigned, the countersignature block may not be set. Second, line types and line weights. In order to make the drawings clear and definite, the lines used in architectural drawing are divided into 6 types: solid lines, dashed lines, single dash long dash lines, double dash long dash lines, break lines, and wavy lines. Among them, the solid lines and the dashed lines are further divided into 4 types according to different widths, namely thick, medium, and thin. The single dash long dash lines and the double dash long dash lines are divided into 3 types according to different widths, namely thick, medium, and thin. The break lines and the wavy lines are generally thin lines. The specifications and uses of various types of lines are shown in the table. The line width B of the drawing lines should be selected from the following line width series. For each drawing, according to the complexity degree and scale size, first select the basic line width B, and then select the corresponding line width group in the table. In the same drawing, each drawing with the same scale should select the same line width group. The segment lengths and intervals of the dashed lines, single dash long dash lines, and double dash long dash lines should be determined according to the complexity degree of the drawing and the length of the drawing lines, but it is advisable that they are equal respectively. In addition, the following points should also be noted when drawing lines. First, the beginning and end of the single dash long dash line and the double dash long dash line should be line segments, not dots. When the single dash long dash line or when the single dash long dash line meets with other drawing lines, it should be a line segment connection. Second, when the dashed line meets with another dashed line, or when the dashed line meets with other drawing lines, it should be a line segment connection. When the dashed line is the extension of the solid line, it shall not be connected to the solid line. Third, for parallel drawing lines, the distance between them should not be less than the width of the thick line among them, and should not be less than 0.7 mm. Fourth, the drawing lines shall not overlap or be confused with texts, numbers or symbols. When it is unavoidable, the clarity of texts, etc., should be ensured first. Third, fonts, texts, numbers or symbols written on the drawings should all have clear strokes, upright fonts, and neat arrangement. Punctuation marks should be clear and correct. The height of the characters should be selected from the following series. If larger characters need to be written, the height should increase in multiples of the square root of 2. For Chinese characters in drawings and descriptions, the song typeface in TrueType fonts should be preferably adopted. When using vector fonts, it should be the Longfangsong typeface. The width to height ratio of vector fonts should preferably be 0.7 and should conform to the regulations in the table. The width to height ratio of TrueType fonts should preferably be 1. For Chinese characters in large headings, drawing album covers, topographic maps, etc., they can also be written in other fonts, but they should be easy to recognize, and their width to height ratio should preferably be 1. For letters and numbers in drawings and descriptions, the Roman typeface in TrueType fonts should be preferably adopted, and the writing rules should conform to the regulations in the table. Latin letters and Arabic numerals can be written either vertically or obliquely. The slant of the italic characters is 75 degrees counterclockwise upward from the bottom line of the character, and the height and width of the character should be equal to those of the corresponding vertical characters. When numbers are written in the same line as Chinese characters, their size should be one size smaller than that of the Chinese characters, and it is advisable to write them in vertical form. The height of Latin letters, Arabic numerals, and Roman numerals should be no less than 2.5 millimeters. Fourth, dimensioning. In architectural construction drawings, graphics can only express the shape of the building, The size of each part of the building must be determined through dimensioning. Building construction and component manufacturing must be carried out according to the dimensions. Therefore, dimensioning is an important task. In drawing, must be serious and meticulous, accurate and error-free. If there are omissions or errors in the dimensions, it will inevitably cause difficulties and losses in construction. Dimensions on architectural drawings generally consist of 4 parts: dimension boundary lines, dimension lines, dimension start, stop symbols, and dimension numbers. Dimension boundary lines are used to delimit the range of the dimensions. Dimension boundary lines should be drawn with thin solid lines, generally should be perpendicular to the length being annotated. One end should be at least 2 mm away from the contour line of the drawing. The other end should preferably exceed the dimension line by 2 to 3 mm. Contour lines of the drawing can be used as dimension boundary lines. Dimension lines are used to indicate the direction of the dimensions. Dimension lines should be drawn with thin solid lines, should be parallel to the length being annotated. Both ends should preferably be bounded by dimension boundary lines. They can also exceed dimension boundary lines by 2 to 3 mm. Any lines in the drawing itself must not be used as dimension lines. Dimension start, stop symbols are used to indicate the start and end of dimensions. Generally, they are drawn with medium, thick short oblique lines. The inclination direction should be 45 degrees clockwise to the dimension boundary lines, and the length should be 2 to 3 mm. In axonometric drawings, small dots are used to represent dimension start, stop symbols, and the diameter of small dots is 1 mm. For the dimensions of radius, diameter, angle and arc length, arrows are preferably used to represent dimension start, stop symbols, and the width b of the arrow should not be less than 1 mm. Dimension numbers are the main basis for building construction. The real size of each part of the building should be based on the dimension numbers noted on the drawing. For the dimension units on the drawings, except that the elevation and general layout plan use the meter as the unit, all others must use the millimeter as the unit, and should not be directly measured from the drawing. The marking direction of dimension numbers should be marked according to the direction specified in the drawing, and try to avoid marking dimensions within the 30 degrees range shown in the drawing as much as possible. When it is really unavoidable, it is advisable to mark them in the form of the right-hand drawing. Dimension numbers should generally be marked in the middle above the dimension line, according to their direction. If there is not enough marking space, the outermost dimension numbers can be marked on the outside of the dimension boundary lines, and the adjacent dimension numbers in the middle can be marked one above the other in a staggered manner. A leader line can be used to indicate the position of the marked dimension, as shown in the figure. Dimensions should preferably be marked outside the contour lines of the drawing, and should not intersect with lines, texts and symbols, etc. For mutually parallel dimension lines, they should be neatly arranged from near to far from the contour line of the drawing being annotated. Small dimensions should be closer to the contour line, and large dimensions should be farther from the contour line. The distance between the dimension lines outside the contour line of the drawing and the outermost contour line of the drawing should not be less than 10 mm. The spacing between parallel dimension lines should be 7 to 10 mm and should be kept consistent. The dimension boundary lines of the overall dimension should be close to the indicated part. The dimension boundary lines of the intermediate sub-dimensions can be slightly shorter, but their lengths should be equal. For the dimension line of the radius, one end should start from the center of the circle, and the other end should draw an arrow pointing to the arc before the radius number. The symbol r should be added. The radius of a smaller arc can be dimensioned in the form shown in the following figure. The radius of a larger arc can be dimensioned in the form shown in the following figure. When dimensioning the diameter of a circle, the diameter symbol phi should be added before the diameter number. The dimension line marked inside the circle should pass through the center of the circle, and both ends should draw arrows pointing to the arc. The diameter dimension of a smaller circle can be marked outside the circle. When dimensioning the radius of a sphere, the symbol SR should be added before the dimension. When dimensioning the diameter of a sphere, the symbol S phi should be added before the dimension number. The notation method is the same as the dimension marking methods for the arc radius and the circle diameter. For the dimension line of an angle, it should be represented by an arc. The center of this arc should be the vertex of the angle, and the two sides of the angle are the dimension boundary lines. The start-stop symbols are represented by arrows. If there is not enough space to draw arrows, dots can be used instead. The angle numbers should be annotated along the direction of the dimension line. When dimensioning the arc length of an arc, the dimension line should be represented by an arc line concentric with this arc. The dimension boundary lines should be perpendicular to the chord of this arc. The start-stop symbols are represented by arrows, and the arc symbol, arc, should be added above or in front of the arc length number. When dimensioning the chord length of an arc, the dimension line should be represented by a straight line parallel to the chord. The dimension boundaries should be perpendicular to the chord, and the start-stop symbols are represented by medium, thick short oblique lines. For the length of bars or pipelines, on single-line drawings, truss diagrams, reinforcement diagrams, pipeline diagrams, the dimension numbers can be directly annotated along one side of the bars or pipelines. For continuously arranged equal-length dimensions, they can be dimensioned in the form of equal length dimension multiplied by number equals total length, or total length number of equal parts. If the structural elements, such as holes, grooves, etc., within the components are the same, only the dimension of one of the elements can be marked. When the symmetrical components adopt the symmetrical omission drawing method, the dimension line of the symmetrical component should slightly exceed the symmetrical symbol, and only draw the dimension start-stop symbol at one end of the dimension line. The dimension number is annotated according to the overall full dimension, and its annotated position should be aligned with the symmetrical symbol. For two components, if individual dimensions are different, in the same drawing, the different dimension numbers of one of the components can be annotated in parentheses, and the name of this component should also be annotated in the corresponding parentheses. For several components, if only some dimensions are different, these variable dimension numbers can be annotated with Latin letters in the same drawing, and another list table is made to write down their specific dimensions. Fifth, elevation. Elevation is divided into absolute elevation and relative elevation. In China, the elevation with the yellow sea surface outside Qingdao City as plus or minus 0.000 is the absolute elevation. For example, the height of Mount Qumolangma, the highest peak in the world, which is 8,848.86 meters, is the absolute elevation, and the elevation with the indoor floor of the ground floor of a certain building as plus or minus 0.000 is called relative elevation. For example, the Jinmao Tower in Pudong, Shanghai, which has 88 floors and is 420 meters high, is the relative elevation in architectural drawings, except that the absolute elevation is marked on the general layout plan. The elevations on the rest of the drawings are all relative elevations for elevation symbols, except that the elevation of the outdoor ground in the general layout plan should be represented by a completely black, painted triangle. All other drawings should be represented by elevation symbols. The figure of the elevation mark is an isosceles right triangle, and its direction can be upright or inverted, with a height of about 3 millimeters. The position pointed by the tip of the triangle is the elevation position, and the length of its horizontal line is determined according to the length of the elevation figure. The elevation figure takes meter as the unit. On the general layout plan, it is noted to 2 decimal places, while on any other drawing, it is noted to 3 decimal places. The zero elevation is noted as plus or minus 0.000. For positive elevation numbers, the plus sign is never added in front. For example, 3.000, 2.700, 0.900. For negative elevation numbers, the minus sign must be added in front. For example, minus 0.020, minus 0.450. This session of the course is over. Thank you for watching.